कई मौसम अनुभव किया मैंने। हालात बदले, लोग बदले, अगर कुछ नहीं बदला तो बाबूजी की सिखाई हुई एक बात, वो कहते थे जब नींव मजबूत हो तो फिर चाहे वक्त के उतार चढ़ाव कैसे भी हो, हम उनका डट कर सामना करने में सक्षम होंगे। बिल्कुल इस पेड़ की तरह ऐसा ही एक अटूट रिश्ता जोड़ता है आपके साथ IDFC फर्स्ट बैंक। विश्वास, पारदर्शिता और सच्चाई का, क्योंकि इनको आपकी सफलता में अपनी जीत दिखती। मैं तो जुड़ चुका हूं इनके साथ, आप भी जुड़ जाइए ना। IDFC फर्स्ट बैंक, ऑलवेज यू फर्स्ट।
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Outlook Business Leading Edge 2021, presented to you by IDFC First Bank. Today we have a masterclass session with Dr. Mark Brouker, retired Captain, United States Navy. Captain Brouker completed an illustrious naval career serving in a vast array of leadership positions. Notably, he served as the Chief Executive Officer at one of the largest naval hospitals worldwide. After transitioning from the military, Dr. Brouker worked at Bridgepoint Education as Divisional Vice President, Strategic Partnerships, and as Senior Leadership Development Facilitator. In 2013, Dr. Brouker founded Brouker Leadership Solutions, a company dedicated and passionate about helping leaders succeed on their leadership journey. Currently, he teaches leadership studies at Chapman University. Thank you so much, Dr. Brouker, for having accepted our invitation to do this masterclass. Over to you, Dr. Brouker.
Well, thank you, ML. I just want to again thank you for inviting me. It's morning here in San Diego, California. The sun is just rising, and I know you guys are on the end of your day. So just fascinating that we can have this technology to do this. But I was telling ML, I traveled quite a bit before the pandemic, like I'm sure a lot of you, and I'm anxious to get back on the road, and I would love to come to India. I've never been to India. It's one of my bucket list places I want to come. So hopefully we can maybe meet someday, hopefully rather soon, and have dinner, and it'd be kind of fun.
Well, oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let me just give you a little bit more intro. It is important, I think, to listen a little bit, just to hear a little bit about my story, because it's a kind of a unique journey. So I came in the Navy many years ago. I ended up doing 30 years in the Navy, in our United States Navy. And about the first 10 years, I noticed my motivation to go to work, my engagement, morale, call it what you will, waxed and waned. Sometimes I was really excited to go to work. Other times I hated going to work. Matter of fact, there were a couple of times I actually called up the Navy's Human Resource Department saying I wanted to quit. Well, you can't quit the military that easily, naively, as I found out. But I want to know why. Why was I so motivated sometimes and hated going to work? And I looked at it, I realized it had nothing to do with where I was located in the United States and actually in the world, because I moved quite a bit that first 10 years to different parts of the world and different parts of the country, some better than others, but that had nothing to do with it. It had nothing to do with the job I had. I'm actually a pharmacist. I'm not a practicing pharmacist anymore. That's been long gone, but I came in the Navy as a pharmacist. I had different jobs under that umbrella. It had nothing to do with the job I had. When I looked into it, amazingly, it was my boss. Some bosses, I got fired up to go to work, excited. Other bosses, like I said, I wanted to quit. And that really intrigued me. I wanted to know why. Why were some leaders get me excited, some want to make me quit? And that started me on a journey of reading and learning and studying, observing. And I came up with about 20 years of some pretty strong feelings about leadership through that journey of learning. And move ahead, I was, I guess, about 22 years into my Navy career, I was selected to be CEO of a pretty big hospital. And initially I was all excited for that opportunity. It was a big promotion, except about a week before I was going to take over the hospital, I started getting nervous. I'm sure maybe that happens to you sometimes. You feel like you bit off more than you can chew. Well, that's how I felt. And one particular night, I could not sleep. I was tossing and turning and having a restless night. I wake my wife up and she looks at me. She goes, "What's going on?" I said, "Well, I'm kind of nervous about being CEO of this hospital." She goes, "Yeah, it's a big job." And she goes, "But," she said, "what are you specifically nervous about?" I said, "Well, hon, here's the deal, is I don't really know how to run a hospital." And she looked at me like only a wife could look at a husband, like, "Are you telling me that we're 1 week away from this thing and you don't know what you're doing?" And that wasn't really an overly dramatic statement. There are so many other people more qualified than I was to be in that position. I knew it, Chris knew it, other people knew it, and it intimidated me. But my wife said this to me, and this is what she said. She said, "Mark, you've been studying leadership for 20 years. You've learned a lot along that journey. Just employ those things that you've learned. Employ the things that you learned. And that's what I did. I employed the things that I learned. And in spite of really not knowing how to run a hospital, and that's the truth today, we were wildly successful. We were one of about 12 hospitals around the entire Pacific Rim of the world. And we came in number one in many categories. And that was surprising to me, very surprising to me. Well, the last job I had in the Navy, I actually was chief of staff, chief operating officer for that same region. And I had about 12 commanding officers, CEOs reporting to me. And those CEOs who employed the 6 behaviors that we're going to talk about were more successful, wildly more successful than others. And I learned from that, and from that whole experience, I just realized that these behaviors that we're going to talk about are extremely powerful, and that's what we're going to talk about today or tonight. So our objective is simply this: we're going to illustrate these 6 behaviors that build trust. It's all about building trust. When you have a group that trusts you, and that really is what I learned through my 30 years. You don't really you don't have to know the intricacies, every piece of business for whatever you're doing, obviously you have to have some modicum of competency. You can't be incompetent, but you don't have to be the best IT person. You don't have to be the best surgeon. You don't have to be the best engineer. You got to be competent, and you have these skills that we're going to talk about. So let's talk about them. So let's talk about this first one: know your staff. We've probably seen this. Leadership's about building relationships, a contact sport. Let's see if I can just make that approve and move that along. Oh, there we go. You've probably seen this in different books you've read. And I thought I knew my people when I went into all my leadership positions in the Navy. But here's what happened. So I was selected to be chief operating officer of a hospital in Rota, Spain, southern part of Rota or Spain, beautiful part of the country of the world. And before I go, though, I'm going to go to a command leadership school in Newport, Rhode Island, where all the CEOs of, we call them commanding officers of military units around the world, go to this school to learn leadership. So I was all excited about this opportunity, and I'm looking at the bios of the folks who are going to be in the class with me. It's a Sunday night class, starts on Monday morning, and it's a 2-week class. And I'm looking at the bios, going, "Holy smokes, man! These people are pretty impressive. They had PhDs from Yale in astrophysics, and they're going to be in charge of massive warships." And I look at my bio, and I'm thinking, "Man, how the heck did I even get here?" I was pretty intimidated. So I go to class. I get there about 7:45. Class starts at 8. I thought I got there early enough to get a good seat. A good seat to me is way in the back in the corner, because it was an amphitheater, about 100 people in this room. And I want to be way in the back in the corner. Well, unfortunately, I was the last person in the room, and I got the worst seat in the house, front and center. I didn't like it, but that's where I was stuck. Speaker comes in. First speaker comes in, 8 o'clock on the nose. Now I'm sitting down front and center, and he says this. He says, "When you meet an employee for the first time, what do you talk about?" And there's silence in the room. No one's saying anything. And I'm thinking, this is an easy question. How could let's get the conversation going. This is easy. And I'm contemplating in my head, should I raise my hand? Pretty impressive crowd. Finally, I can't help myself. I raise my hand. The guy says, "Yeah, what do you got?" I said, "Well, you talk about the mission, vision, guiding principles. You talk about the do's and don'ts. You talk about your push button issues, all the buzzwords that people get when they get their MBAs and stuff." And the gentleman who's speaking is shaking his head like in apparent agreement. I think I'm hitting a home run with this thing. And finally, he looks at me. He goes, "That's absolutely wrong. That's not what you talk about." And I turned red. I was sweating. I lost my composure. But I was intrigued. I'm thinking, if you don't talk about that, what do you talk about? And he said, "That's what they're expecting. The folks are expecting you to talk about the do's and don'ts. They're talking about the job." And he said this, and I wrote this down. He says, "Resist the temptation to go there. Instead," he said, what he said is, have them tell you their story. Have them tell you their story. Don't go through the do's and don'ts. Spend time getting to know them as a human being." Some of the things he said was, ask them, "What do you love to do? What are your goals? What are your aspirations? What are your expectations of me as a leader?" I mean, that's a powerful one. It shows that you're vulnerable. It's a beautiful thing. I guess if I were in your shoes, and all the different industries that are represented here, a lot of new industries being formed. What I would say is this: this is a massively important behavior. Instead of talking about the job on the first one-on-one meeting, get to know your people. I've done this ever since that meeting I had back in, I think it was probably 2008. It was a game changer. Get to know your people. First behavior, know your staff. Second behavior, be visible. Be visible. Get out of wherever your office is and see your people. So let me just tell you this story. So I was always pretty good at this. I like getting out. I like seeing people and getting to talk with them. What happened with me is when I was in command, when I was CEO of my hospital, we had a bit of a crisis brewing. What was going on, and this is in probably 2009, the government was going to shut down. Our U.S. government was going to shut down because Congress, our Congress and legislator couldn't pass a budget, which meant for me, for my 1,500 people, about 400 of them were going to get laid off because we have not just active duty at hospitals, we have GS civilian people working at these hospitals. And bottom line is they were going to get furloughed, get laid off without pay. And that caused a lot of consternation. And this is about 4 months away. And so my assistant said to me, he said, Mark, you should get you should have some town hall meetings, get together, be visible, get in front of these people and talk to them about and answer their questions about these furloughs. And I told him, I said, his name was Ken. I said, Ken, that's not a very good idea because I don't have any answers. And truthfully, I was just a conduit of information. I did not have any answers to these questions. This is all being decided at the White House, at the Congress, and way above my pay grade. But he convinced me to do it against my better judgment. So I go down to the auditorium, I get in front of all these people, and all these people in the audience are going to get furloughed. And I got down there, I said, here's the deal. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm here to answer your questions, so please fire away. First question, sir, what's the likelihood of this happening? And I remember saying, well, I don't know. It depends on Congress. If they pass a budget, then it'll be averted and we can move on. Second question, sir, are we going to get back pay? And I said, I really don't know yet. I don't want to set expectations. I don't know. That would be a decision made by the comptroller of the Navy. The point is this. Now, listen, I didn't answer one question, none. And I thought it was a complete waste of time. Well, about 2 months later, we have an all-employee survey, anonymous survey, and every year the Navy does this in all their commands around the world, and they basically try to figure out, do the staff members trust the leadership in that hospital? And that's what they were doing with this anonymous survey. And it's broken into cohorts. You can get young officers, more senior officers, civilians, whatnot. Well, and it's broken into cohorts. You can measure the trust in these different cohorts. Well, the cohort that I had these lunch and learns with, these town hall meetings, their trust in me was relatively significantly higher than any other group. What was fascinating is you could put free text comments in these, and those folks put free text comments in the survey, and they basically said, Captain Brouker answered all our questions on furloughs. He answered all our questions. And I'm thinking, who the heck are they talking about? I didn't answer one question. But from their perspective, I don't know. I can't explain it, but they're trusting me in spite of the fact, and this is really the bottom line, in spite of the fact I provided no valuable information for them about these furloughs, they trusted me more. And I think it's because I spent some time with them. I was visible. That's the thing. I was vulnerable. I didn't come up with answers I didn't have answers to. I guess the thing I really want to point out with being visible is when you're visible, one of two things are going to happen. You're going to be perceived as approachable, or you're going to be perceived as intimidating. You don't want to be intimidating. Intimidating leaders, not good. When you're intimidating, the folks in the trenches, they're more concerned with not making a mistake than being creative and getting their job done. Let me say that again. When you're creating fear because you're intimidating, the folks who are actually doing the work, they're not focused on being creative and solving issues. They're focused on not making errors. So when you're visible, just give accolades, thank them for what they do, ask them, how can you help them? Just be very mindful that they're watching you, and every time you walk around, every time they see you, every communique from you impacts this level of trust. The third thing, so first thing is know your staff. Second thing is be visible. Third thing is be respectful. Always treat all staff with dignity and respect. Always treat all staff with dignity and respect. And it was, for me, that was so much easier on a Friday when people are excited about the weekend. Much harder on a Monday when bad news came. When bad news came, sometimes I didn't react appropriately. And here's the key. Every interaction between you and your employee impacts trust. It's either going to increase or decrease. Some interactions more than others, This is a big one. And the one I'm talking about is when, not if, but when bad news comes. That is a major contributor to the culture that you create, the culture that you own. So I'm in road to Spain, chief operating officer of a hospital out there, and we're about 3 months away from a major inspection. Basically, it's a routine inspection every 3 years. The Navy hospitals get inspected by outside entities, and everyone gets nervous. I'm sure your places have been inspected. People get nervous, of course. You're proud with what you've done. So I was a second in command, deputy commander, if you will, chief operating officer. My boss at the time had an anger issue. Any kind of bad news presented, boom, there was anger. So there's quite a bit of culture of fear at this hospital. So we're preparing for this inspection, and it's a Thursday night, and I had different officers going out to different parts of the hospital, inspecting them, just making sure they look squared away. I hear a knock at my door. Officer comes in, sir, I just want to let you know I just did the inspection of the labs. All the laboratories look good, sir. The blood bank was all within date. The temperature logs taken, and he's going on, and it looked all routine, sounded routine. He's telling me that the blood bank was good. The fresh frozen plasma was good. Everything was good. And he did say this. He said, sir, one other thing about the freezer. In the freezer, in the lab, sir, I found a leg. Thinking, leg? I asked him, I said, what do you mean, a leg? What kind of leg? He said, a human leg, sir, human leg. Looks like a below-the-knee amputation, sir. Is frozen solid. The leg was frozen solid. Had a little tag on the frozen toe with a social security number and a date. Looks like it's been there 5 years, sir. 5 years. And I'm having this out-of-body experience. I'm thinking, what the hell? How did this leg get in there? I had all these questions, but the thought that predominated my thoughts were, holy smokes, I got to tell the boss tomorrow. And this is bad news, and there's going to be a lot of anger. Well, the lieutenant who's briefing me knew about the anger with the boss, and he says to me, he whispers, he goes, sir, one other thing with the leg. Sir, we can get rid of it tonight. I said, what do you mean get rid of it tonight? Because, sir, I'm the facilities manager. We have a contract with the Spanish incineration team. They're coming on the base pretty routinely, and I get boxes together. They take the boxes off the base. They burn the boxes at their incinerator. Tonight, I'll call them up. I'll get some boxes together. They'll come on the base. They'll take the boxes off the base. They'll burn the boxes. Except tonight, I'll slip the leg in one of the boxes. I'm thinking, wow, that's kind of an interesting idea. He goes, sir, it's a great idea. Give me the go. Give me the go. Just give me the thumbs up. I'll make it happen. I said, wait a minute. The leg's been in there how long? 5 years, sir, 5 years. I said, you know what? It can wait a night. This doesn't seem right. Of course, this didn't seem right. He leaves my office, and he kind of winks at me. He goes, sir, if you want me to burn that leg, you just call me up on the cell phone. I'll make it happen. He leaves my office. It's all quiet, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I did not want that leg to be, I didn't want to tell the boss the next day about this leg. I wanted it to go away. And I looked at my cell phone thinking, man, one phone call, this all goes away. Drive home that night, and my cell phone's on the passenger seat. I kept looking at it and saying, man, one phone call, this thing goes away. I get home, I tell my wife, Chris, the whole story. She goes, you're not thinking of burning that leg, are you? I said, it's crossed my mind. She goes, you can't burn that leg. You got to man up and tell the boss the next day. And she was absolutely right. And it kind of hit me. I'm thinking, Mark, what were you thinking? Going the next day, tell the boss, nuclear explosion of energy. It was a huge distraction for the command because everyone heard that the boss got angry, and everyone was distracted. I was distracted. I was distracted for 3 days. I felt so bad that maybe I should have known about that leg. The point is this, and I should say, we did a root cause analysis. We never did find out what caused that leg. We knew it was a motorcycle accident. We ascertained that. We contacted the patient. Everything was good. Inspectors came in. We changed some policies, and we passed the inspection. Everything was good. The point of the story is this. There was a culture of fear at that command because of the behaviors of the leader. The behaviors of the leader create the culture. And in that command, there was a culture of fear because anger was a predominant tool of this leader. And because of that, I considered doing something pretty stupid. I considered burning that leg. Now, I didn't pull the trigger on it, but thanks to my wife probably. But that's the point, is cultures of fear breed bad decisions. That's it. Let me say that again. Cultures of fear breed bad decisions. When the bad news comes, not if. What you can control is your behaviors always. In this situation, you must not show anger. The fourth thing, so know your staff, be visible, be respectful. The fourth thing is don't ignore good or poor performance. Don't ignore good or poor performance. Good performance, give accolades. I just want to say, ML, I know my folks here who work with you, they love working with you. You're awesome, and you set this up seamlessly. Great job. That took about 5 seconds, was meaningful, it was well-earned, and hopefully it made ML evening. Give accolades abundantly. They don't cost any money. You don't have to write up a long report or anything. You just say it. So when someone does a good job, boom, hit them with a accolade. It's a beautiful way to build trust, build morale. On the other side, the opposite side, poor performance. I just share with you, I was never good at this. I don't like having difficult conversations with employees, and I wasn't good at it. But what I learned along the way was Stephen Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. It's an iconic book, a great book. One of his behaviors was to seek first understand. When someone's not doing the job you want, ask them, help me understand what's going on. And I'll just share with you, many years ago, this really cemented this behavior home to me. Is I had a pharmacy tech back in the day when I was running pharmacy who was making a lot of errors, not good. Fortunately, they were caught by the pharmacist before they went out. And I was going to sit down with this young man and have a counseling session with him and just talk to him. I said, hey, let's talk about, your errors. And I would have said this: you got to just focus more. You just got to focus more. You're smart. Just focus more. We can't have an error go out here. Well, fortunately, another person who was his immediate supervisor said, sir, let me counsel him. You can be there. And this kid must have just read this book, Seven Habits, because we walk in the room and the supervisor of this young man says to him, and he says this, he goes, help me understand why you're making these errors. That's all it was. And he earnestly wanted to know. It wasn't like, he was saying, I really want to understand. So help me understand. There was silence in the room. And finally, this young man says, well, Chief, and his nickname was Chief. Chief, here's the deal, is I'm not sleeping well at night. My room is really cold. I don't have enough blankets. It's kind of chilly. If you could give me a blanket and put some heat in my room, because he lived on base, which is like a dormitory for our young sailors, I think I'll be better. I don't know what happened. I'm sure what happened is his supervisor gave him some blankets, gave him some heat, and the kid's errors stopped. So when you have someone who's deviating and needs a course correction, as we call it, instead of accusing them, just literally say, help me understand and fill in the blank. Extremely powerful. So the fifth thing I want to talk about is optimism. So know your staff, be visible, be respectful, don't ignore good or poor performance, and be optimistic. And optimism is so massively important. Where that came home to me was my last boss in the Navy was Admiral Faison. He was a 2-star admiral. Stars is how many stars you have on your collar. And he was really high ranking. I was his assistant. I was his chief of staff. This man was always optimistic. At least he looked like he was optimistic. As I got to know him, because we travel around the Pacific together all the time, visiting our hospitals, I could tell when he was faking it. And there were many times he was faking optimism, but outside people wouldn't know the difference. And that is the key to leadership. You cannot go in a perfect world. Let me just say this right up front. In a perfect world, you do not show pessimism. Pessimism is poison, period. You must, in a perfect world, you're upbeat, optimistic. Napoleon said it best, is a leader needs to be a dealer in hope. You must give your people hope. And probably for many of you listening in, the last year has been such a challenge. The other thing is you got to be realistic. You can't give false hope. And that is just that's probably the biggest challenge I had as a leader, was how do you give hope, but not be deceitful to your people, because you can never be dishonest to your folks. But somehow you've got to find that knife's edge of being hopeful and optimistic, but also be honest with them. That's a gift of leadership that is very, very important. But overall, the bottom line is this: is you must give your people hope that there's going to be a better day going forward. So the last thing I just want to talk about real quick is continuously learn the art of leadership. So the first thing, again, I'll wrap them up when we're done, because I got one more here. So the last one I just want to talk about is continuously learn the art of leadership. And it really should be, and I probably thought about changing it when I wrote the book, but I should say continuously relearn the art of leadership, because here's the deal. I suspect everybody who's listening to this was aware of these behaviors. They've seen great leadership. They've worked. If I asked folks to say, tell me a great leader you work for, or maybe you work for right now, they probably would show that they care for their people. they probably listened really well, which is a good thing about respect. They probably got to know you a little bit. You probably saw them a lot, either by Zoom or face to face. They were probably pretty upbeat, pretty optimistic. So the thing is, you know these things. But what happens, at least in my opinion, what happened with me is I kind of knew this, but what happened is in the heat of battle, if you will, in the business churn, when you've got a lot of stuff going on, it's easy to slip into some bad habits. So I'm convinced you were so attentive. We got some time for Q&A here. That over the next 6 months, maybe 3 months, when you get bad news, for instance, you're going to remember old Mark Brouker say, well, be careful how you react. Don't get angry. Be careful with your body language. Because they're going to, the thing is, you want bad news. You can't fix things if you don't know about them. So you remember that, and you'll probably more likely behave the right way. But if you don't remind yourself of these behaviors, you could slip into those bad habits. So that's why I added, it's the shortest chapter in the book, continuously relearn the art of leadership. So just a quick recap. So know your staff, be visible, be respectful. Don't ignore good or poor performance. Be optimistic, upbeat, fake it if you have to. Always be honest with your people, of course. And the last one is continuously relearn, if you will, the art of leadership. And just the last thing I'll just say is I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, and I put quite a bit of stuff out. It's all free. Feel free to, I'll share the slides with ML, and she can forward them to everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brouker. It was a really inspiring, invigorating talk. Your moot point about leadership success is really about the power of caring, from what I understand. And in your book, you also quote Roosevelt saying, people don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. And you also recounted this instance where you were in a situation where people were followed, they were angry, you couldn't answer their questions, you just showed up, you were visible, and people trusted you. My question is, just by being visible and not being able to answer questions or solve people problems, can this strategy really work over longer periods of time? And specifically, I ask this question because of today's situation of pandemic, where leaders often find themselves in situations where the interest of the organization is directly in conflict with what employees seek. For example, your business may require people to travel, but asking people to travel in these times may not be seen as displaying care. You may not be able to manage the ship unless you let go of some people, but obviously firing people is not show of care. What do you think leaders can really, what do you think they should do in situations like this, where there is a direct conflict and there are no easy solutions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's talk about it. So let's go under two scenarios, ML. One scenario is boss A. Okay, so everyone just follow me with this. So boss A, ML, you come aboard, I meet you, we talk about how I want you to work. I want you to do this. I want you to be here at 8. I want you to leave at 4:30. You take a half-hour lunch. Good luck and have fun. And you see me maybe each quarter at a get-together, and I may come over and say hi to you. I might not. Now we're into this job 6 months, and you've run into me a couple of times, but we really don't know each other. And then I say, hey, ML, I need you to travel. And you're not comfortable with travel because of COVID or something. Pick something. You're really going to have a hard time doing that. Now, boss B, you come aboard. Just like I said in the very first slide, I get to know you really well. ML, tell me about your life. Tell me what are your aspirations, your goals. What can I do to make your be the best boss I can be? What do you love to do? Get to know you. You see me twice a week, maybe 3 times a week, and we don't talk about work. Sometimes we do, but I just say, hey, ML, how are your kids? How's things going? And I give you good feedback. I'm pretty upbeat. And then I say to you, ML, I guess here's the deal. I need you to travel, and here's why. You still may have major consternations about travel, but I'm going to guess that you're going to trust me more, and you're more likely to do that. Again, you could, at the end of the day, so let's leave it right there before we go to the next step. whether it's you need to let people go. I'm directing you to let people go, or I'm directing you to work 3 hours more a night. Under scenario B, under boss B, you're more likely to do it. Let's just be completely honest. Or let's put it this way: I have to fire you. It's going to be that conversation, or I have to course correct you. You're not doing what I asked you to do. That first scenario, you're going to be so fearful when I walk in the room with you. You're going to be petrified in fear. Let's just be honest. The second scenario, you're going to say, Mark, I think you're right. I think I need to change a little bit. You're just going to be more likely. So all this stuff we talked about is in preparation for that inevitable crisis. We got pandemic right now. Who knows what the next one's going to be? It's going to be something, whether it's micro in your business or macro in a global pandemic. When you do these things, you build trust. In asking people to do something they're not comfortable doing is much easier when you do these 5 things. Does that make sense? And at the end of the day, ML, I guess the last thing I'll say is I talked to a lot of folks back when I was traveling a lot. They come up to me after, and someone would be in tears because their boss was so horrible and all this other stuff. I tell them the same thing I would tell you. If you're doing something that you're not comfortable with in your current job, you can quit. You're all talented. Just if you don't like your boss, or you don't like the what he or she is making you do as far as travel or whatever it is, just move on. Life is too short to work in a job you hate. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. Kind of a long answer, but it's a great question.
Sure. So that actually leads me to my next question, which is, pre-pandemic, we were used to this nice office space where everybody comes together and we build trust. We have these water cooler conversations, informal chats. There is a natural way in which you can interact with people and have that camaraderie. Now, in the digital world, and I don't know even after the pandemic if we are going to go back to that kind of work where everybody comes together to a workspace. At best, it could be just a blended work where, some days you spend at work or X number of hours you spend at work and rest of it through digital. This naturally limits the leader's ability to have those personal equations with, people down the line. So, given the limitations on time and also the digital setup, how do we really build this trust and keep this camaraderie going? So in times of crisis, you're able to encash on that brand equity or goodwill or whatever you call it.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. Here's what I've thought about this quite a bit, because it is the reality we live in today, and it might not go away anytime soon, and we might just be doing this forever. Who knows? Here's my answer to that. It's a great question, ML. Is you do these exact same things, except you do more of them. That's it. I mean, being visible, obviously, more Zoom calls. If you can't see the person face to face, at least you can get on a Zoom call, or just call them up. If ML, you work for me, if I just called you up, and probably a good idea to schedule it because people are so busy. Be respectful of people's time. But I said, you said what's the topic going to be? I said, I don't know. I just want to connect with you. And maybe I call you up and say, ML, I don't want to talk about work. How you doing? How you dealing with this pandemic? I know you've got 3 kids. I don't know, but assuming you have kids or whatever it is, how's it going with school and stuff? How's your mother? I know your mother's pretty old. But if you know something about the person who works for you, you can connect with them on a personal basis. And sometimes when you connect, you don't have to talk about work. So and to answer your question is we must do all of these things except better remotely. Knowing your staff, you can still have a conversation, know your staff, but just Zoom. Being visible, you do a Zoom call. Being optimistic, well, you're either if I came on the call and I'm looking like this at you, squinting, and I'm very pessimistic, wringing my hands on it, well, it's the same thing as being live. So I just say you must do these things even more, because we're in uncharted waters with this webinar and electronic meetings. Great question. I've actually talked to a lot of different folks. One gentleman at Facebook, I work with Facebook, and what he does is he randomly pops in. Now he's pretty high up at Facebook. He randomly pops in on meetings, and also just imagine your meeting. And ML, you're running the show, and I'm your big boss of everybody. I've got like 10 MLs under me, and I pop in and say, "Hey, ML, how you doing? I'm just going to listen in and see what's going on." And this guy's got such a trust with his people; they don't mind. But you just pop in and say, "Hey, how's everybody doing?" I just want to say hi. I'm going to listen. So there's ways you can build that trust in the current world we're living in.
Sure. We have some interesting questions coming up. Udit Pava, can you please unmute yourself and ask the question?
I have a team which is spread all over the country now, and prior to that, we were all a very close knit team, and we used to enjoy a lot of time off work as well, going for playing sports and kind of catching up dinner, etc. at a team level. And now everyone's working isolated, and in a work from home scenario, you have not only the stress of work, but also the stress of your personal life. And this is where the relationships then come under stress. So how do you, or what would be your advice in this scenario to, keep those relationships going as well as get the best out of the current scenario?
Yeah, that's a great question, Udit. I mean, that really is a great question, man. So here's what I would do. I always think of it, if I were in your shoes, as we say in the US, if I were in your shoes, what I would do, and I just to kind of back this up with, there is some, I do have experience with this, because what happened is when I was in my last job in the Navy, I was chief of staff we had 10 hospitals around the Pacific, and they literally went from the west coast of the United States to the Indian Ocean. There's an island called Diego Garcia just south of the tip of your country that we have a base there. But anyway, we had all these remote employees. I had 12 commanding officers, CEOs all around the Pacific, some of whom I met, some of whom I never met, and I was responsible for them. And what I would do, and we had 2 wars going on at the time. We had men and women in Afghanistan and Iraq. It was pretty stressful. Money was running out. It was a very stressful time in our military, truthfully. And sometimes, and this is where my advice to you, Udit, and others is this, is sometimes I just call them up and literally would say, "Hey, Jim, how are you doing?" And he goes, "Well, Mark, don't you want to talk about, our deployment schedule?" I said, No, I don't want to talk about work, Jim. I'm just concerned that we got a lot going on and you've got a lot of responsibility. And I'm just concerned about, how you're doing as a person with your marriage and everything else. Just how's everything going? And I tell you what, I can't tell you how many compliments I got after that tour. They would call me up after, "Mark, I got to tell you, man, I really appreciate you just calling me up once in a while and just saying, 'Hey, how are you doing?'" And we didn't talk about work, because it did help me just redirect and have someone to talk to. So in today, with everything going on with kids at home and schools shut down, I can't think of a more challenging time to be a boss when you've got folks who are doing all these different roles in very difficult situations. What I would do is not randomly call, but schedule calls with your people. But instead of talking about work, just ask them how they are doing and listen.
One last question from Jagdish Parekh, and we can close. Captain, I'll ask the question he has put here. Jagdish Parekh wants to ask, at times your caring nature gets taken for granted at the workplace and affects output. How do you balance that with the needs of the firm?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a really good question, because you will be challenged in taken advantage of. Your good nature, we're going to take advantage of you. And I would say maybe I'm just thinking of an example where they take advantage of you. Say, Mark seems like a pretty nice guy. I'm just going to come in a little bit late. And so if you remember the fourth behavior, and so I guess that's a great question. You must do all 5 of these behaviors. You can't just do one and think you're going to be successful, because that fourth one is critical. And the fourth one is don't ignore poor performance. Don't ignore poor performance. If you do that, you will not be taken advantage of, because you'll know what's going on. You'll know who's doing something not quite right, or they need a course correct. So if you do the other 4, know your staff, be visible, be respectful, and be optimistic, and don't do that fourth one, you're going to be taken advantage of to your detriment. So you must not ignore poor performance. And poor performance is a big umbrella of different things. But if you see something that needs to be changed, you must change it. You must have the courage to address that issue. And if you don't, you will be taken advantage of. I hope that answers the question.
Sure. I guess that is it. We have run out of time. Thank you so much, Captain Brouker. It was a really awesome, inspiring session. And we've got more than what one could have expected in 45 minutes. Thank you so much for all the distilled wisdom you've been able to share with us. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Hopefully we'll get to meet sometime down the road, face to face, when this thing is all over.
Oh, absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Have a good evening, everybody.